The day Mariana faced prejudice and became a symbol of justice alongside her husband, a renowned judge. Mariana just wanted to buy a special gift for her husband. Married to Ricardo, a renowned judge, she decided to surprise him with an expensive watch to celebrate an important achievement. It was supposed to be a happy day of celebration, but everything got out of control. As soon as she entered the jewelry store, Mariana noticed suspicious looks from the salespeople and the security guard, who began to discreetly follow her around the store. Despite her discomfort, she continued looking at the windows, trying to ignore the strange atmosphere. But then, unexpectedly, the store's alarm went off. Without thinking twice, the manager, without any proof or explanation, demanded to search Mariana's bag in front of everyone. Even without finding absolutely anything, the situation got worse. The police were called, and Mariana, without having committed any crime, was handcuffed and taken to the police station, being publicly humiliated in front of customers and employees. At the police station, the situation seemed even more absurd. But everything changed when Ricardo arrived. Seeing his wife in that condition, Ricardo was outraged. He immediately demanded Mariana's release and confronted everyone present, denouncing the prejudice, abuse of authority, and inhumane treatment that his wife had suffered. The police officers, upon realizing the seriousness of what they had done and who Ricardo was, tried to justify themselves, but the damage had already been done. Ricardo was not satisfied with just an apology. He took the appropriate legal measures, prosecuted those responsible, and brought the case public, denouncing racism and injustice. But Mariana and Ricardo decided to go further. They turned this painful experience into a mission. They created a social project to offer free legal assistance to victims of prejudice, police abuse, and discrimination. Today, the couple uses this scar to help other people and make a difference in the lives of those who need it most. This story, unfortunately, is not an isolated case. It happens every day and needs to be told. Mariana has always been immensely proud of Ricardo, her husband. More than a respected judge, he was recognized for his integrity, empathy, and tireless fight for justice. Together, they built a life based on companionship, overcoming challenges, and celebrating achievements over the years. Now, with Ricardo's recent promotion to a highly prestigious position at court, Mariana felt it was the ideal time to repay, in a symbolic way, all of her husband's effort and dedication. Determined and emotional, she decided that she wanted to give him something special, something that would mark that important phase of their lives. After days of research, conversations with friends, and even discreet consultations with Ricardo himself, Mariana finally found the perfect idea: an elegant and sophisticated watch, one of those that, more than marking time, carries stories and memories. It would not just be an accessory, but an eternal reminder of the pride and love she felt. On the appointed day, Mariana woke up excited, already visualizing Ricardo's surprise smile when he opened the box. She dressed with care, chose a discreet but elegant look, and headed towards one of the most famous and luxurious jewelry stores in the city, where she knew she would find something to match the occasion. As she walked through the store's glass door, she was greeted by a sophisticated atmosphere. Illuminated windows, sparkling jewelry, and a soft soundtrack filled the space. Mariana felt inspired, walking through the corridors with a sparkle in her eyes, paying attention to every detail of the watches on display. It was as if, for a few minutes, she was immersed in a movie, already imagining the scene of Ricardo receiving the gift. However, the magic soon began to fade. Mariana realized almost instinctively that something was wrong. From the first step into the store, the attendants' looks seemed different. They were not welcoming or helpful as usual. On the contrary, they were cold, suspicious, as if she shouldn't be there. The atmosphere, which had previously been dreamy, became filled with tension. The security guard, who had previously been near the entrance, began to follow her in a disguised but noticeable way. With Mariana's every movement, he adjusted his posture and carefully observed every gesture, as if he expected her to be about to commit a crime. Mariana, upon noticing the situation, tried to maintain her composure and continue her search, but the discomfort was inevitable. The charm of choosing a special gift gradually transformed into a scene of silent judgment. Even feeling the tense and uncomfortable atmosphere, Mariana tried to hold on to the reason she had come there, to choose the perfect gift for the man who had always been the great love of her life. She took a deep breath and tried to concentrate on the watches on display, imagining Ricardo's smile when he received the gift. It was supposed to be an unforgettable moment, full of meaning, but little by little, everything was distorting before their eyes. As I walked through the store, the feeling of being watched was no longer just an impression. It was almost palpable. The seller's eyes, which should have been welcoming and interested in helping her, were full of judgment. Mariana noticed that they were whispering discreetly, exchanging complicit glances, as if they were watching a scene about to unfold. The security guard, getting closer and closer, accompanied her in a disguised way, but Mariana clearly noticed that her every movement was followed, calculated. He pretended to tidy up the windows or check the security cameras, but his eyes were fixed on her the entire time. The environment, which had previously seemed luxurious and elegant, now became claustrophobic. Mariana, used to being a safe and calm woman, began to feel her breathing become shorter. That cold and suspicious look that hovered over her was hard to ignore. Why were they doing that? Could it be that her simple way of dressing didn't match the expected profile of customers there? Or was the reason even more cruel? Prejudice. The discomfort was so great that Mariana could barely concentrate on the clocks. Still, she mustered the strength to stand her ground. He hid his embarrassment, adjusted his hair, and continued examining the models. Inside her, however, a bitter feeling that something was about to go wrong overwhelmed her. And then, as if confirming his worst fears, the unexpected happened. A shrill alarm cut through the air, echoing through the jewelry store's hall and silencing conversations, making all eyes immediately turn to Mariana. She froze. I was standing next to one of the windows, not understanding where the noise was coming from. Before she could even ask what was going on, the store manager approached her aggressively, his face tense and his finger pointing at her bag. Bluntly, he ordered Mariana to open it immediately. The tone of voice was not a request, it was an order, public and humiliating. Mariana was perplexed. Her first reaction was to try to argue, saying that she hadn't done anything, but no one seemed willing to listen to her. Feeling cornered and under everyone's inquisitive gaze, she gave in. Her hands shook as she opened her bag, exposed as if she were a criminal, while the manager and security guard searched through her belongings without finding anything at all. No evidence, no stolen items, nothing. But even so, the atmosphere did not change. The humiliation is not over. The customers continued to stare at her, whispering and judging as if she were, in fact, guilty. The alarm was turned off, but the heavy atmosphere remained. Mariana felt her face burn, not just with shame, but with indignation. All he wanted was to disappear from there, and then, as if that wasn't enough, the sound of police sirens echoed outside. 2 police officers rushed in, without even questioning what had happened. Without dialogue, without listening, they walked straight to Mariana. Even though she was visibly shaken and tried to explain that it was all a mistake, she was treated as guilty from the first second. Amid everyone's incredulous gaze, the police officers coldly ordered, "Put your hands behind your back." There, Mariana felt like she was living a nightmare. Mariana tried with all the dignity she had left to argue, With a trembling but firm voice, she repeated that she had not taken anything, that her bag had already been searched thoroughly, and that it was all just a misunderstanding. Her every word was a desperate plea for justice, but it was as if she were speaking to a wall. The police officers simply ignored his words, as if his version of the facts had no value whatsoever. The look of the store manager, who still maintained an authoritarian stance, only reinforced the false suspicion that hung over her. Her tone of voice, dry and incisive, seemed to say, "We know what you did." But Mariana knew she hadn't done anything. The pain of injustice grew with every second. The cruelest thing of all was seeing that, without any concrete evidence and without the slightest investigation, she was handcuffed right there, in front of everyone. The customers' eyes turned to her, some with expressions of astonishment, others with curious and even sadistic looks. Some whispered, exchanging muffled comments, while she was led to the store's door as if she were a highly dangerous criminal. The sound of the cuffs clicking, the weight of humiliation. It was all a nightmare, but she couldn't wake up. Mariana felt the shame eating away at her soul, and the disapproving looks from the other customers seemed to weigh more than the handcuffs on her wrists. The pain of being treated with such disdain, without the chance to defend herself, was something she would never forget. She had been silenced, discredited, and that hit her more than any accusation. Upon arriving at the police station, the treatment did not improve. It was as if, simply by being there, she was already considered guilty. The police officers treated her with absolute coldness, as if she were invisible, an intruder in the system who did not deserve even a look of compassion or respect. Even without any evidence against her, Mariana was booked with the sound of the typewriter keys echoing in the cold room as she watched the police officers laughing among themselves, making jokes at her expense. As if she were being put aside, a mere number in the system, of no importance whatsoever. She was taken to an isolated room, where she had to wait in silence, feeling the humiliation deepening with each passing minute. There was no one there to hear his version, no one interested in understanding what had happened. It was as if his word had no weight at all. Soon, news of his arrest spread. Journalists began to gather at the police station door, and the sound of cameras firing flashes seemed to echo in his mind. Mariana, as she was taken from one room to another, could feel people's judgmental looks. Each one, with their own opinion, looked at her as a criminal. The weight of those nasty looks and comments hurt her deeply. She, a dignified woman, married to a respected judge, was being publicly exposed and humiliated, as if she were anyone else. And what hurt most was not the unfair accusation, but the way her dignity was being destroyed, step by step. Nothing she said mattered. The lie had already been dictated. As he tried to maintain his composure, trying to find the strength to endure, the situation, the sound of the police station doors, opened with force. Ricardo, her husband, entered with the imposing presence of a man who knew exactly the power he had. Accompanied by other court colleagues, he seemed to bring with him an aura of authority that immediately changed the atmosphere within the room. The police officers' gazes, previously full of disdain and coldness, quickly turned to nervousness and embarrassment. They, who had treated her like an ordinary offender, were now clearly uncomfortable, aware that they were not dealing with just anyone, but with the husband of a renowned judge. Ricardo, with a firm and authoritarian posture, went straight to the room where Mariana was being held. When he saw her there, handcuffed, with her face pale and her eyes filled with indignation, he contained the anger that was already taking over his body. The pain of seeing his wife being treated like that was almost unbearable, but he didn't let it get to him. Without wasting time, he went straight to the police, demanding explanations. He didn't need to raise his voice, but his look and his tone of authority spoke louder than any words. He asked coldly, "What evidence do you have to arrest my wife?" "Where is the crime?" The police officers' silence was deafening. None of them were able to present plausible evidence or justifications. Ricardo's eyes, with a gleam of revolt, made it clear what was happening. Everything was nothing more than prejudice disguised as suspicion. Realizing the seriousness of the mistake made, the police chief, visibly embarrassed, ordered Mariana to be released immediately. However, the damage was already done. The suffering caused by public humiliation, the shame of being treated like a criminal for no reason, and the deep feeling of injustice were irreparable. Mariana, although released, knew that the mark left that day would never be erased. When Ricardo hugged Mariana, he felt a mixture of anger and helplessness. His heart was heavy with the pain his wife was going through, but he also knew it wouldn't end there. There was something bigger at stake. It wasn't just what happened to Mariana, but what it represented for society as a whole. He made a promise to himself. There would be consequences, and he would go to great lengths to ensure that something like this would never happen again. As soon as he managed to take Mariana home, Ricardo wasted no time. He was furious, but also determined to act. As he sat down with her, he looked into her eyes, and with the characteristic calm of a judge, said, "It won't stay like that." He knew he had to be incisive, not just for his wife, but for all the people who could suffer the same type of abuse. He was determined to confront those responsible for Mariana's unjust arrest. Ricardo went straight to the point. With a firm look full of indignation, he addressed the police officers who had made the mistake. "Do you have any real reason for her arrest? Any evidence, anything beyond the simple alarm raised an unfounded suspicion?" An uncomfortable silence filled the room, and the once confident police officers seemed to have been hit by a direct blow. They were not prepared to face Richard's authority. He, with his unshakable stance, continued, "This is not protocol. This is a serious error based on prejudice, and the one who pays for this is not just Mariana, it is the whole of society." Ricardo's words were harsh and precise, and the police officers, who had previously seemed calm, were now visibly shaken. The delegate tried to justify, trying to divert responsibility, but Ricardo left no room for maneuver. He was relentless, demanding a clear explanation of how a simple security error, which was not even properly investigated, led to his wife's unjust and humiliating arrest. The heavy silence in the room was proof that there were no excuses. The police chief's lawyer also tried to defend himself, but there was no denying it. This was the result of prejudice, not a genuine error. At the end of the conversation, Ricardo left no room for doubt. He demanded that Mariana be released immediately and that all evidence of her innocence be officially recognized. "My wife is not a criminal," he said firmly, looking directly at the police officers. "You know that. Now you must act in accordance with justice." With these words, Ricardo turned and left, making it clear that he would go to the end to hold those who had committed such injustice accountable. After Mariana's release, the story soon made headlines and spread like wildfire. On social media, the repercussion was instant and intense. Ricardo, without hesitation, contacted his prosecutor friend, and with his help, initiated immediate legal proceedings against the police officers involved for abuse of authority, racial slurs, and illegal arrest. The case became a landmark of resistance against abuse of power. Public pressure was so strong that people from different parts of the country began to speak out, sharing their own experiences of discrimination and abuse, and showing solidarity with Mariana. Outrage took hold, and many people called for punishment for the police officers involved, believing that it should not be treated as a simple mistake. Meanwhile, inside the police station, the officers involved began to feel the weight of the situation. One of the agents, visibly shaken, commented to a colleague, "How did we find out that she was married to a judge?" But more important than that, The mistake made was exposed to the entire country. The pressure increased by the minute, and the police internal affairs department began a formal investigation into the case. Ricardo knew that this was just the beginning of a much bigger fight. This was not just a legal process, but a battle for justice and dignity that would impact the lives of many other people. He was determined to ensure the case was treated with the seriousness it deserved and the truth was heard. No matter how long it took, he was willing to fight until the end. Public pressure was not limited to the police officers involved. Luxury jewelry store La Croix, where the whole situation started, also had to face the consequences of its mistake. The store's name, until then synonymous with sophistication, was now linked to a public scandal. Customers began canceling their purchases, and the store's reputation was irreparably tarnished. The outrage on social media was palpable. The images of Mariana being handcuffed in front of the store went viral, and people could not ignore what had happened. Trying to save its image, the jewelry company released a clarification note, apologizing for what had happened, claiming that it was all just a misunderstanding. But instead of calming tempers, this only increased public outrage. Many demanded more than just empty words. Mariana and Ricardo did not accept the store's excuse. They sued the jewelry store for moral damages and racial discrimination. The case gained even more traction on social networks and in the media, and the pressure on the store increased every day. The image of the woman being humiliated there, in the center of the city, was not something that could be erased with simple excuses. The jewelry store's defense tried to argue that there was no intention to discriminate, but the security camera images and the employees' testimonies made it clear that the treatment given to Mariana was discriminatory and based on unfounded assumptions. When the store realized the case was heading to court, it offered a financial settlement in an attempt to resolve the situation quickly. But Mariana, with her firm and dignified posture, refused. "This is not just about money, it's about respect," he said, making it clear that it was not about financial compensation, but the need for justice. The scandal gained even more proportions. Protests began to be organized in front of the police station and the jewelry store, and television programs began to discuss the case in prime time. Mariana's voice, initially silenced by oppression, now spread as a symbol of resistance against abuse of authority and racial discrimination. She was no longer alone. Their fight was now the fight of everyone who had been wronged, a fight that would not be stopped until the truth was recognized and those responsible paid for their wrongdoing. If you like videos like this, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next video. Until next time.